Hey everybody, and welcome back for more RPG Horror Story Cringe. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master that overreacts and blows up on his players, and a story about a dungeon master that doesn't take character builds into any sort of consideration. But first, this chart shows that some of you that watch the videos aren't yet subscribed, and I just have to ask, why not? It's free, plus it makes Nipsey extremely happy.
Yes. It makes me happy. I really like this bed.
As do I, Nipsey. As do I. Now, let's get right into the cringe. GM has a not-so-minor meltdown. By Reddit user UKKmaster. Sorry if this is a bit long. This happened a number of years ago, but it sits rent-free in a few of our brains, and I figured I would share. We had a larger party, more than our usual 4, so fights could get a little weird when someone could or couldn't make it. This meant the GM would try to prep as best as he could for what seemed like a frequently expanding and shrinking team. I, the monk, and my partner, the wizard, were constants, as were our friends the barbarian and the melee rogue. We also had another archer rogue, as well as a cleric, but they were a little sketchy for attendance at times. This is very relevant. I was playing a specific archetype of monk in Pathfinder called a Totori, who specializes in grappling, including things of unusual size or physiology, but lose almost all of the usual punch and kick stuff of monks. It's a class that does cause some contention in groups, but I picked it mostly to better learn the grappling rules without needing to constantly reference the grappling flowchart. So, we were traveling through a destroyed city in some desert wastes. There were ghosts and other similar creatures around that we were mostly avoiding due to their ghastly numbers. Sneaking was working until a giant sand pit opened up, and after a bunch of checks to scramble and escape it sucking us in, our gargantuan scorpion comes rumbling out and initiative is rolled. On this day, our rogue archer isn't with us. As per our party's usual tactics, if it's a single foe, I engage and grapple, as I get to ignore a lot of size restrictions, and the party moves into position, such as flanking for sneak attack and distance for the casters. The GM was expecting me to be unable to grapple it, but the wizard cast in large person, and soon, despite the GM's annoyance, the scorpion is rapidly being monk-handled. It kept trying to sting me, but between my high AC, flurry of grapple, and my monk's immunity to poison, the party makes quick and brutal work of our monstrous vermin foe. High fives and cheers on some solid group work, good organization, and playing to our strengths. GM grumbled a bit, but we moved on. The next game, we have a full party as we were finally escaping the desiccated city, and a massive undead purple worm comes broiling out of the sand, and the GM proudly, to much group laughter, plops a loaf of bread onto the table. Cue our same strategy, but this time, the GM says that I cannot grapple it because it has no limbs. He also uses the "in real life" argument to say why my grappling doesn't work, and everyone calls him out in it as being a cheap ruling when wizards can manifest fireballs and druids can transform into plants. I was especially annoyed as it was him making a random ruling just to nerf me to make the fight go how he wanted. The GM concedes with annoyance, and this time, with the archer present, our foe is squashed, like the insect it is, in record time. The damage was absolutely nuts between the two rogues and barbarian, as I held it fast and all of us were super hyped and high on D6s and 20s. And buttered toast. We were feeling confident and excited, but weren't aware of the desert storm brewing. The next game, the cleric cancels last second, so we're down to 5 again. The GM hates running a game without a healer of some kind, but he had planned too hard to cancel for 2 weeks away from then. He was expecting all 6 of us, but adults have lives outside of game, sadly. reality is stupid and dumb and unfair. Anyways, an encounter shouldn't be hugely different for 5 meant for 6, right? Still in the desert, but away from the city, we get ambushed by the enemy we sought with well over a dozen archers. The wizard gets targeted hard and is terminated quickly, but not before she can get a flu spell off on our valiant archer. The melee rogue ducks off to who knows where for cover and to get a better vantage point. Or at least that's what the coward argued. And our archer engages the flying enemy wizard with bow in hand. The barbarian and I charge the guards in front of the archers, and I acrobatics past them into the archers. The barbarian goes on an axe murder spree while I tie up the one-string harp band as best as I can. I'm holding on as best I can, but the archers are rolling a rather enormous number of 20s, as that's what they need to hit me due to me being defensive. By the time I take out 3, the barbarian has cleared out a dozen warriors and comes to help me. His damage reduction makes a joke out of their needle storm, so they keep focusing on me. Before the barbarian can clean up, the rogue is still skulking for the perfect spot. I go down, dying but not dead. A wizard falls from the sky as gracefully as a pin-cushioned corpse can, and 2 use magic devices by the melee rogue later. The party is now all back on their feet, still hurt, but with 2 of us theoretically now able to move much faster. Proud of our feat against all odds, we pat each other's backs and compliment our ability to adapt when things go awry. I can't recall who said it, but someone then says, "Man, that was tough, and certainly a change from that purple worm, eh?" The GM explodes, specifically at me. He's like 55 at the time, and you'd think that we had just had a gender reveal party for his car and we colored it with blue paint. I was preparing to call the ER to prep them for burst heart valves and brain splatter. Now, my partner and I have known the GM for like 10 plus years at this point. The melee rogue has known him since university in their mutual 20s. He sometimes took things personally as a player, but none of us had seen or expected this with him as a GM. He accused me of ruining his game, mocking his encounters with my abilities, and making a twinked out character that might as well be cheating sometimes. I'm sure the church would have sanctioned him for a second time for the language that he used, as he was already an atheist. I suggested calling the game there, and democracy prevailed that day, and we all packed up to go home. He stormed to his room, and we left in silence. The game was cancelled for like 2 months in order for him to calm down before he called me. I was worried that I'd grappled my way out of a friendship. We did end up making up, not out, sorry shippers, over the phone call. He admitted to that not being cool of him, and that his work being rough, combined with the feeling like the hard work and challenges he created were being minimalized into a meme, had caused him to freak out. I offered to either drop the character or rewrite it due to the conflict, but after a very heartfelt apology, he told me he'd just have to find other, more legitimate ways to screw me over. Well, that certainly sounded like an overreaction if I have ever heard one. The GM was definitely in the wrong for acting that way, especially when the players in OP were just playing their characters as designed and within the rules of the game. Though, it did sound like GM was going through some personal stuff. And unfortunately, people can sometimes take out their frustrations on people that don't deserve it. At least GM realized that he was in the wrong and apologized. That doesn't usually happen in these stories, and shows character on his part. And hopefully, OP's monk can survive what he's about to throw at them. And before we get into the following story, do you have a story that you would like to be shared in a video? If so, be sure to post it to the D&D Doge subreddit, and who knows, it may just end up on the channel. But with that said, let's get into this one. DM screwed over our monk and gave me a panic attack. By Reddit user, Just Weird Out. So, this was a 6-person campaign a friend of my brother's was running last year, and it was a ton of fun. For like 85% of it. The only characters that really matter here are me, the monk, and the DM. So, our monk chose Way of the Shadow, as he thought it would be fun and thematic for his character. And one of the main abilities of Shadow Monk is teleporting in dim lights and darkness by seeping into the shadows. Right? Problem is, our DM never gave him opportunities to use this feature, to the point that it became a meme for us to ask the DM if it was dim light anytime we went anywhere. Walking through the woods? Is it dim light? Anytime we got into a fight? Is it dim light? Simply walking into a tavern? Is it dim light? I believe the only time he actually got to do it in a situation that mattered was he teleported into a giant's waistband, as he was a halfling, from its shadow, because the waistband had shadows in it as well, and he got to attack it from there. I don't know if it's just me, but as a DM, you should create situations for your characters to use their fucking abilities. But whatever. So, dim light shenanigans aside, he also took mounted combat, as he thought it would be interesting, and as a halfling, he thought he could argue that riding one of us would count as a mount. Two of us were more than twice his size. I'd say it was reasonable. DM, once again, never gives him any chance to use this feat, until we fight some goblins mounted on giant frogs, and I, as a druid, befriend one of them for my monk friend, because I wanted to give him a shot to use this feat. DM allows it, and the second he tries to use the mounted combat, DM says, "Your arms are too short to attack anything while on the back of this frog." I couldn't believe this shit at this point. To make things even worse, we got into a fight with some lich thing, who cares, and it summoned this giant fucker with a huge sword. Round 1, we all take a few shots at it. Its turn comes, and it deals a critical hit to our monk friend. What does the DM tell our monk who just took massive damage? "You lose your entire fucking arm." Are you fucking kidding me? He literally took away this guy's ability to deal damage to people. How is a monk supposed to use flurry of blows with one arm? Anyway, a little later, after surviving the encounter, we're back in town. Monk goes to an artificer, gets a prosthetic arm, and convinced the DM to let it double as a grappling hook and ranged punch. Pretty sick stuff. Except, the DM counted shooting his hand and pulling it back as 2 full actions, making it almost entirely useless in combat. He wouldn't even let him use his extended hand as a long-ranged flail attack by swinging it around. So, after fucking him over for the 3rd time, we get into one of the last dungeons of the campaign, where my panic attack comes in. We get into a situation where we're all teleported into some dream world type thing. Me and our party's rogue come to in a tavern. I'm now playing as a bard because my previous character decided to peace out of the party. I hated playing her because I built her terribly. And I come to in the middle of the tavern playing music, and our rogue is there too with other stuff going on with him. Every time I try to stop playing music and walk around, I teleport back to my seat and am playing again. After a few attempts, everyone starts booing me, so I break my lute over my knee. DM says, "It splinters into your leg, and now you're bleeding out." And every few seconds, he tells me how much damage I take. He's getting fed up with me panicking, trying to figure out what to do, and starts counting down from 30, and clapping his hands every time he counts, saying, "You gotta learn to make quick decisions." So, basically he's telling me my character is going to die if I don't fix it before 30 seconds is up. I, now thoroughly having a panic attack because I cannot handle being rushed, just say, "Okay, fuck it, I just slit my fucking throat and die then." At which point, the DM realizes what he's done and backtracks, saying that my character patched it up. But hey, damage was already done, and I no longer wanted to be there. Then, the other 4 players had their dream scenario. They all come to in some ruins surrounded by enemies. They are thrust into a fight, and our monk, fully in character, realizes it's a losing battle after our 2 fighters' weapons break instantly because it's some puzzle, and he just casts darkness and runs away. DM does not like this, and has the enemies easily find their way out of darkness and despite Monk being stealth with like a 26, has all of the enemies beeline straight for him. He gets thrown during the fight and tries to use slow fall, which reduces falling damage, which he would have taken had he not tried to. Our DM says with a straight face, "How do you slow your fall?" That was the most insane shit I've heard, and the last straw for our monk. He immediately starts arguing that slow fall doesn't have any text saying that you have to do it in a certain way. It literally just slows your fall to take less damage from a fall, and the DM ended the argument with, "Your character is dead, make a new character." Needless to say, he did not come back, and I left shortly into the next campaign. TLDR, DM completely fucks our monk multiple times by not allowing him to use his abilities, and gave me a panic attack by forcing me into an extremely stressful situation where I would have died in 30 seconds real time if I didn't react fast enough. I have to agree with OP. DM should take the player's character builds into consideration when planning encounters. That way, the characters each get a moment to shine with their abilities. But it sounds like this DM didn't even do the bare minimum to achieve that. Then, when Monk actually got the opportunity to use some of the abilities, the DM decided it would be a good idea to throw roadblocks on it, like saying the monk's arms weren't long enough to attack from a frog, and even going to the drastic point of removing one of his arms. Also, that whole situation with the countdown really hits home for me, as I am the same way as OP. I really hate it when someone tries to rush me to do something, because that only causes me to screw up and make things worse, causing whatever thing to take more time in the long run. So I really don't blame Monk or OP for not wanting to play with this DM anymore. Though, what are your thoughts? And that is all we have time for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.